There are few military machines whose legacy has survived as long as the Soviet T-34. More than 8 decades after its introduction, this World War II tank continues to capture the imagination of historians, military enthusiasts, and defense analysts around the world. Most tanks eventually fade into obscurity, replaced by newer and more powerful designs. Yet the T-34 achieved something extraordinary. It not only helped determine the outcome of World War II, but also remained in military service across multiple continents for decades afterward. Nowhere is that story more fascinating than in North Korea, a country that never fully let go of the legendary tank. While other nations retired their T-34 fleets and sent them to museums, North Korea continued preserving, displaying, and in some cases reportedly maintaining these historic vehicles. The question is not simply why the tank survived, but why North Korea chose to keep it alive long after its military usefulness had largely disappeared. The origins of the T-34 can be traced to the late 1930s when Soviet military planners sought a replacement for existing armored vehicles. The Soviet Union had observed developments in armored warfare and understood that future conflicts would require tanks capable of combining speed, protection, and firepower. Previous designs often excelled in one area while sacrificing another. Soviet engineers wanted something different. Their answer was the T-34. When the tank entered production in 1940, it represented a major leap forward in armored vehicle design. One of its most revolutionary features was sloped armor. Rather than relying solely on thick armor plates, the T-34 angled its armor to increase protection while reducing weight. This simple but effective innovation made enemy shells more likely to ricochet. Combined with powerful diesel engine and wide tracks designed for difficult terrain, the tank proved highly adaptable in a variety of conditions. When Germany launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, many German commanders were shocked by the capabilities of the T-34. Existing German anti-tank weapons often struggled against its armor, while the tank's mobility allowed it to operate effectively in mud, snow, and rough terrain. Although early Soviet crews suffered from inadequate training and communication problems, the T-34 demonstrated enormous potential. As the war continued, Soviet engineers refined the design. The most famous version, the T-34-85, entered service in 1944. Equipped with an 85mm S-53 gun, the new variant provided greater firepower against German armor. The larger turret accommodated a 5-man crew, improving battlefield efficiency and communication. Powered by a 500-horsepower V2 diesel engine, the T-34-85 could reach speeds approaching 55 kilometers per hour and had an operational range of approximately 300 kilometers on roads. The T-34 became one of the defining weapons of the Eastern Front. It participated in major battles, including Moscow, Stalingrad, Kursk, and the final assault on Berlin. By the end of World War II, the Soviet Union had produced more than 80,000 T-34s, making it one of the most successful and influential tank programs in military history. Victory in Europe did not mark the end of the T-34 story. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. As Cold War tensions emerged, the Soviet Union sought to strengthen communist governments throughout Asia and Eastern Europe. Large numbers of surplus T-34 tanks were transferred to Allied nations. Among the most important recipients was North Korea. Following Japan's defeat in 1945, Korea was divided into Soviet and American zones of occupation. In the north, Soviet influence shaped the creation of a new communist government under Kim Il-sung. As North Korea built its military, Soviet advisors played a crucial role in training personnel and supplying equipment. The T-34 quickly became the centerpiece of the young nation's armored force. By the late 1940s, North Korean crews were receiving extensive training on the tank. Soviet instructors taught tactics, maintenance procedures, and operational doctrine. The T-34 was not merely imported hardware. It became a foundation upon which North Korea's armored warfare capabilities were built. Its most significant test came on June 25, 1950. On that day, North Korean forces launched a massive invasion across the 38th parallel, beginning the Korean War. Spearheading the offensive were hundreds of T-34-85 tanks. Against South Korean forces, which possessed almost no tanks and very limited anti-tank capabilities, the T-34 proved devastating. North Korean armored columns smashed through defensive positions and advanced rapidly toward Seoul. For many South Korean soldiers, the sight of Soviet-made tanks rolling southward represented an entirely new form of warfare. Infantry units armed primarily with rifles and machine guns found themselves largely powerless against armored assaults. The T-34's combination of mobility, firepower, and psychological impact contributed significantly to North Korea's early successes. Entire defensive lines collapsed under the pressure of coordinated infantry and armor attacks. Within weeks, North Korean forces controlled much of the Korean peninsula. However, the battlefield situation changed dramatically when United Nations forces, led primarily by the United States, entered the conflict. American troops arrived with more advanced anti-tank weapons, heavier artillery, and superior air power. Tanks such as the M26 Pershing, M46 Patton, and upgraded Sherman variants began challenging North Korean armor. While the T-34 remained a dangerous opponent, its weaknesses became increasingly apparent. Its armor was no longer invulnerable, and American aircraft relentlessly attacked supply lines, fuel depots, and armored formations. As the war progressed, North Korean tank losses mounted. The Korean War demonstrated both the strengths and limitations of the T-34. Against poorly equipped opponents, it could dominate the battlefield. Against a technologically advanced military supported by overwhelming air power, its effectiveness declined significantly. When the war ended in 1953, North Korea faced the challenge of rebuilding its military. By that point, newer Soviet tanks, such as the T-54 and T-55, were entering service. These vehicles featured improved armor, larger guns, better reliability, and enhanced combat performance. Many countries quickly phased out older T-34s in favor of these modern designs. North Korea, however, followed a different path. Rather than immediately retiring its entire T-34 fleet, it gradually integrated newer vehicles while retaining older tanks in secondary roles. This decision reflected both practical and strategic considerations. Economically, maintaining existing equipment was far cheaper than replacing thousands of vehicles. The T-34 was mechanically simple and relatively easy to repair. North Korean technicians already possessed extensive experience maintaining the tank. Spare parts could often be manufactured domestically, reducing reliance on foreign suppliers. Strategically, North Korea embraced a doctrine emphasizing large reserve forces and prolonged national mobilization. In such a system, even outdated equipment retained value. Tanks that were no longer suitable for frontline combat could still serve training purposes, support reserve units, or operate in defensive positions. Throughout the Cold War, North Korea expanded and modernized its armored forces. Soviet-designed T-62 tanks became increasingly important, and local modifications eventually produced indigenous variants. Newer tanks gradually replaced the T-34 in frontline formations, yet complete retirement never occurred. Instead, many T-34s found new purposes. Some reportedly became fixed defensive emplacements. Others were transferred to training schools where new crews learned basic armored warfare principles. Certain vehicles were preserved in storage, while others became part of museums and memorial sites. The symbolic importance of the T-34 grew alongside its declining military relevance. In North Korean historical narratives, the tank became closely linked with the founding generation of the state and the early victories of the Korean War. It evolved from a combat vehicle into a symbol of national resilience and revolutionary struggle. Today, visitors to military museums and monuments in North Korea can still find preserved T-34s displayed with great pride. During military commemorations, restored examples occasionally appear as reminders of the country's wartime heritage. In North Korea, its story continues not because it is the strongest tank, the fastest tank, or the most advanced tank. Its story continues because it became something far more enduring. It became a legend that the country simply chose never to forget.